What's up, Backlog Gamers, and welcome to the channel. My name's Ted, and today I'll be going over the latest game I've crossed off my list, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins, and what an interesting game this was. But before I get into it, I'd like to give you a bit of context on what my disposition was on this game going into it. So obviously, as a backlog gamer, I was able to get reviews and other opinions on the game prior to playing it. I heard a lot of the complaints, took those into consideration, and went from there. But more importantly for me, the biggest thing with this game is I was looking forward to it because I was a huge fan of the team's prior game, Nioh 2. I like Nioh a lot as well, and both of those games are some of my favorites. So I had pretty high expectations for this game, even though I heard some kind of mixed opinions on it overall. And what I got out of it was, unfortunately, also quite mixed. There's a lot to like about this game, a lot I enjoyed, but there's also quite a bit I think that's wrong with it. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off, one of the things I knew about the game going in was kind of the cringe content it has. I remember seeing the meme that was going around when the demo was available of the main character basically saying he doesn't care, plays a song, and walks off the set, which is a really awesome scene, and there is a good amount of that content in here, although it's not as frequent as I might have hoped. Overall, though, the story is kind of fine. It's not really great, but there are definitely some moments in it that are just really funny and enjoyable to watch. In particular, I think the character Jack was done very well. He is a very simple-minded person that has a singular goal of killing chaos, as he'll say over and over again, as I'm sure you're all aware if you've watched any of the trailers for the game. This leads to a lot of entertaining scenes where when the enemy would typically do a whole monologue of what they're going on about and why everything is happening, Jack will simply cut them off and go straight to the fight, which is a really entertaining premise and a good change of pace from a lot of games out there, frankly. Unfortunately, the same can't really be said for a lot of the supporting cast. The remaining characters are all extremely bland and forgettable. I honestly couldn't tell you anything about those characters, what their goals were outside of just helping the protagonist, and until the end, they really didn't do much of anything. On that front, the story as a whole is fairly simple. They're there to kill chaos, as Jack says, and the way it evolves is kind of standard up until the very end where they pull some crazy stuff. It was something I kind of expected, since I think I got a little spoiled personally on the story aspect of it, but the way it played out was really entertaining, and honestly the best parts of the story happened towards the very end, which I think make a lot of it kind of worth it. I just wish they did a better job developing and building those characters, which would have made the ending a bit more impactful and all that more worthwhile. At any rate, I don't think the story is the main draw of this game, as most people coming here should be expecting not so much a great story, but stellar combat. And Stranger of Paradise does an excellent job delivering some fantastic combat, with a few caveats that I wasn't so sure about myself. Coming from Nioh 2, I felt that overall, Nioh felt a lot more refined than Stranger of Paradise. In Nioh, there weren't quite as many weapons, but with the weapons you had a lot of different skills to build off of them, and it all worked into itself very well. Stranger of Paradise does a job system that you would expect to see in a Final Fantasy title as it is, but I found myself kind of missing the way it was handled in Nioh. The job system allows you to progress in tiers, where you start off in a lower basic job and then go on to more advanced and expert level jobs. The skills you get throughout these leveling processes are able to be combined with the other jobs you have, which allows you to create basically your own sort of playstyle, which is really fun, really unique, and very good. But I found myself thinking a lot of it felt a bit disjointed. While there were a lot of abilities you could use, these were made in a way so you had to select the abilities you had available to you. What this allowed you to do was to select what you wanted to bind to specific combo outputs, which usually led to a combination of pressing R1 once, pressing R1 twice, followed by R2 will do a specific combo, and you could choose which ones you wanted to put in there. And being able to build your own moveset was quite unique and very enjoyable, but at the same time it kind of felt lacking because you could only do so much with that. But at any rate, the thing the job system does very well is it gives the player a lot of variety. There are a lot of different weapons in this game, and they're all very fleshed out. They have their own abilities, their own combos, and while you might be pressing the same buttons for all those combos, they feel unique. And this is what I think is the best aspect of the game. The combat is just very good. It's fun, it's exciting, there's a lot to look forward to as you're leveling up, and it always feels fresh, kind of throughout the whole game. And while I think there are some issues with the balancing and certain enemies that feel unfair, outside of those moments I felt the combat was very well handled. Now, I did feel in the very beginning kind of underwhelmed with the combat system, and I think that had a lot to do with my preconception of how Nioh worked and what I was hoping Stranger of Paradise would be. But once I moved past that sort of idea I had in my head, it really allowed me to enjoy the game. And if you're going into this game, I would highly recommend you go back to the tutorial level, because it gives you a few optional side missions on that tutorial which explains a bit more in detail how to use each weapon type. After doing that, I found myself a lot more engaged in the combat and just having a better understanding of how it all worked, which really worked to improve my perception of the game and increase my overall enjoyment. But while the combat might be very good, certain aspects of the game don't quite match up. In particular, I think the level design of this game was not good. Most, if not all of the levels are extremely linear, with just one path to take and maybe another path to get a few extra things. And on that front, going that extra way never really felt all that rewarding. And this comes down to the looting system, which is also a bit lackluster. While you might be receiving a lot of different items, all it really comes down to is what level they are. Sure, there are stat bonuses and a few differences here and there on the weapons and armors, but most of those stats were the same across the board, and I found myself realizing that the only thing that really mattered with the loot was the level. Some of the weapons might have unique skills available to them, but I didn't like using those since I'd be swapping out weapons so often that I just have to respec whatever combo I used with those skills to use something that was currently available. And this ultimately just led me to not wanting to manage my inventory at all. I found myself always opting to use the auto optimization feature and never really looked at my gear all that much, if at all. And that's on top of the fact that the game wants you to optimize the gear of your party members as well. And given that the looting system wasn't so great and was so cumbersome to manage, it made exploring feel even less rewarding. I find myself just wanting to go the exact path I needed to get through the levels, instead of wanting to go check out what's in that corner over there because maybe I'll get some good loot. Because at the end of the day, I really didn't care about what I was receiving outside of, is this a higher level than what I already have equipped? Which is a shame, because I feel if the looting system was done better, it might help make up for some of that linear design in their levels, but unfortunately there just wasn't that draw there. This might vary from person to person, maybe it's just not my sort of style, or I wasn't looking forward to managing all this sort of equipment, but I do think it was a little too much, and the loot wasn't unique enough to make it worthwhile overall. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the game's overall presentation. I think the graphics in this game do a good enough job, and the design of the equipment in particular was very well done. That said, there are certain aspects of the graphics that just look off to me. In particular, I felt a lot of the things looked oversaturated or had a filter over them that just made it hard to kind of see what was going on. In particular, there was a section in the game where you were in a forest. In this level, the ground just seemed to radiate light in a way that made it kind of distracting and hard to see, where other levels are overly dark and it's hard to tell what's going on for that reason. But on top of that, some of the graphics and designs are just a bit bland. There's not a whole lot going on, and I think this ties back a bit into the level design where there are corridors upon corridors upon corridors, and it's really easy to get lost since there's no real landmarks in a lot of these areas. And for that reason, I think the design is lacking. But that'll vary depending on your personal tastes and what you're looking for in the game overall. But to wrap things up, what I would say is that overall, Stranger of Paradise is a very fun game to play. While I might not have enjoyed the combat as much as I did in the team's previous game, Nioh 2, I think they did an excellent job with the job system that gives you a lot to work with and gives you a create your own style of play feel to it. The story itself is so-so, but it definitely has some highlights with some pretty cringe moments that are worth experiencing. And while I might not have been enamored by the level design, graphics, and overall visual presentation of the game, it does a good enough job to get you through one area to the other, while allowing you to take full advantage of the combat system. If I were to give a rating to this game, I'd probably put it somewhere between a 6 and a 7, but I definitely recommend it to people that are looking for a fun combat system, or just have a general interest in Final Fantasy games as a whole. But that's enough from me today. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I would love to hear your thoughts on Stranger of Paradise. Otherwise, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you next time.